Okay, are we all ready? This is a customer review by one John W. Osborne Jr. After having been told my danglies looked a bit like an elderly Rastafarian, I decided to take the plunge and buy some of this, as previous shaving attempts had only been mildly successful and I nearly put my back out trying to reach the more difficult bits. Being a bit of a romantic, I thought I would do the deed on the missus's birthday as a bit of a treat. So I ordered it well in advance, and working in the North Sea, I considered myself a bit above some of the characters writing the previous reviews and wrote them off as soft office types. Oh, my fellow sufferers, how wrong I was. I waited until the other half was tucked up in bed, and after giving some vague hints about a special surprise, I went down to the bathroom. Initially, all went well. I applied the gel and stood waiting for something to happen. I didn't have long to wait. At first there was a gentle warmth, which in a matter of seconds was replaced by an intense burning and a feeling I can only describe as like being given a barbed wire wedgie by two people intent on hitting the ceiling with my head. Religion hadn't featured much in my life until that night, but suddenly I became willing to convert to any religion to stop the violent burning around the turd tunnel and what seemed to be like the destruction of the meat and two veg. Struggling not to bite through my bottom lip, I tried to wash the gel off in the sink, only to succeed in blocking the plug hole with a mat of hair. Through the haze of tears, I struggled out of the bathroom, across the hall, into the kitchen. By this time, walking was not really possible, and I crawled the final yard to the fridge in the hope of finding some sort of cold relief. I yanked the freezer drawer out and found a tub of ice cream, tore the lid off, positioned it under me. The relief was fantastic, but only temporary, as it melted fairly quickly and the firing stabbing soon returned. Due to the shape of the ice cream tub, I hadn't managed to give the starfish any treatment, so I groped around in the drawer for something else, as I was sure my vision was going to fail fairly soon. I grabbed a bag of what I later found out was frozen sprouts and tore it open, trying to be as quiet as I did so. I took a handful of them and tried in vain to clench some between the cheeks of my arse. This was not doing the trick, as some of the gel had found its way up the chutney channel, and it felt like the space shuttle was running its engines behind me. This was probably and hopefully the only time in my life I was going to wish there was a gay snowman in the kitchen, which could give you some idea of the depths I was willing to sink to in order to ease the pain. The only solution my pain-crazed mind could come up with was to gently ease one of the sprouts where no veg had gone before. Unfortunately, alerted by the strange grunts coming from the kitchen, the other half chose that moment to come in and investigate, and was greeted by the sight of me, arse in the air, strawberry ice cream dripping from my bell end, pushing a sprout up my arse whilst muttering, "Oh, that feels so good." Understandingly, this was a shock to her, and she let out a scream. And as I hadn't heard her come in, it caused an involuntary spasm of shock in myself, which resulted in the sprout being ejected at quite some speed in her direction. I can understand that she, having a sprout farted against your leg at 11 o'clock at night in the kitchen, probably wasn't the special surprise she was expecting, and having to explain to the kids the next day what the strange hollow in the ice cream was didn't improve my status. So to sum it up, Veet removes hair, dignity, and self-respect. There you go. Shall I do the gummy bears? Shall I do the gummy bears? Gummy bears. This is by Jason Ellenberg in 2014. So, to preface this, I will state that it is not good to upset anyone in the military supply network. This is especially true for a supply NCO who can be both creative and vindictive to those who earn his ire. One of my biggest pet peeves was troupies who walked into my supply room and decided to go through the things on my counter or desk. It is for this reason that I purchased 2 bags of these sweet little revenge snacks. I briefed my minions that morning that the snacks were to be unsullied by their hands. I told them that I would know and it would not go unpunished by both myself and the higher powers. They thought I was joking, but decided not to test my authority before my eyes. With that said, I placed the bowl on the back part of the counter, just in reach of anyone loitering inside my supply room. The rules were posted for all to see when they came in, so they were warned. A large sign said, "If you touch my stuff, you will be punished." And so they decided to test me, I guess. On this weekend, we were set to do a general cleaning and maintenance within the battalion, so my desk was rather busy. I was in and out of my office all day. However, I made sure to take general measurements of my bowl of horror every time I came back. Shortly before lunch, my unholy wrath began to strike. My supply room was one door down from the latrines, and the roll of mail commodes is on the other side of the wall from my desk. It was the first, but it was not the last. It was initially heralded by the sound of Gabriel's trumpet escaping from the sphincter of one poor soul. He hit the latrine and sounded as if he kicked the stall door open, and for the next 30 minutes I listened to the sounds of a live humpback whale being butchered by a blind man wielding a chainsaw. It was not long before another troop, this time a female, made her way along to the latrine. She came from the indoor pistol range and had to cross in front of me. I saw a pale woman with sweat streaking her face. She was hobbling with one hand on the wall for support and the other on her stomach, praying for just a little more time. For lunch, I ripped into an MRE and listened to those ever-growing chorus of those who had so far snuck down half of my bowl of brightly coloured improvised colon explosive devices. I was not sure if the other side of the building was seeing the same activity in the latrines, but the smell reached my door by the end of lunch. Good thing I was stationed with the infantry unit for the first 4 years of my career, so I was accustomed to bad odours. One of my minions did not return from lunch, so I volunteered another to perform a possibly suicidal scouting mission in the male latrine in search of my wayward soul. He was there and had been there since the beginning of lunch. By 1500, I was told that the unit was being locked down and there was an emergency meeting in the battalion briefing room. I had a suspicion of the reason, but attended as I was ordered to do so. By this time, my bowl of gelatinous bow howitzer ammunition was 1/4 filled. The meeting began slightly off schedule. At 15:22, the sergeant major walked into the room and looked as if he'd just performed a 3-day combat operation without sleep. The battalion XO walked in not long after and looked as if he'd been intimately assaulted by a rather insistent horse. I used all of my military bearing to keep from cracking a joke about cavalry officers walking bow-legged. The battalion sergeant walked in and told us there was a high chance that the unit had come into contact with a strange stomach bug. Roughly one half of the battalion was complaining of stomach cramps and explosive diarrhea. It seemed to be mostly affecting the headquarters and the company that was on the same side of the building as us, also the medics. Until symptoms cleared, the unit was in lockdown and cleaning mode. So I went back to my supply room with the intent to bag up the remaining evidence of my involvement, only to find that the bowl was missing. My minions were too wrapped up to notice anything, though, so I began a search for evidence that would probably land me in front of a firing squad. The empty bowl was located in the admin offices. Someone had found it and decided to liberate it from my supply room for the only group that I didn't want to upset. But they had already consumed the remainder of the biological weapons. As I left with the bowl, I heard the familiar sound of incoming fire from the senior pay clerk's desk, followed shortly after by what sounded like Lamar's breathing. That weekend, the entire building was cleaned from one side to the other. MREs were consumed in the hopes of plugging the torrential flood of liquid terror, and every door and window was opened with fans going over a cup of Pinosol in every room. 3/4 of the enlisted and half of the officers were hit with the mystery stomach bug, and the medical supply room was in desperate need of more IV kits. I don't know if my message got across, but it was definitely an entertaining weekend.
This is for you, Bernardo. Tom, a bartender in Montreal, thought he'd found a shortcut to get rid of his chest hair. He used to trim it for the summer, but he wanted it completely gone. And he said he didn't want to deal with
nipples.
Didn't want to involve shaving it again and again all season. His fix, Nair. The removal cream that contains active ingredients like lime and lye to break down the hair. With no offence to Nair, but lye is also what the assassins used to dissolve corpses. The package directions warn you to do a patch test first and not let the substance sit on the skin for longer than necessary. But as a novice, Tom jumped right in and his nipples suffered. My chest hair came off and my nipples burnt, he said. The complica- but the complication is you have to wipe the nair off. And he was pretty convinced his nipples were coming off too. Gummy fair on the plane, that's fantastic.
God.
The horror at 30,000 feet. My flight was leaving at 8 in the morning. After awaking and trying to get to the airport, I forgot to grab something to eat. I usually take my time and do things in order, but not this day. I was travelling from Boston to LA, coming home from a work trip. I do it regularly, so nothing was new to me. I stayed in the same hotel and knew the time that I needed to leave to get to the airport on time. During my work trip, I stopped at a convenience store and saw these gummy bears and thought they'd be a perfect gift for my son Charlie. He loves gummy bears and gummy worms. So, the morning I was to head back to LA, I slept through my alarm. That never happens. I rushed to get out of the hotel and threw those gummies in my carry-on bag to make it on time to the airport. After speeding and filling up the gas in the rental, I made it to my gate as we were boarding. I get on the plane and head down the aisle to find my window seat near the middle of the plane. I asked politely for the two adorable older ladies sitting in the middle and the aisle seats if I could pass by. They obliged. The lady in the middle must have been around 80 years old, so it took her some time to get up and make sure she was holding on to something so she didn't fall as she stepped into the aisle. I thanked them as I sat down and settled into my seat. Fast forward 20 minutes as we reach our cruising altitude of around 30,000 feet in the air. As I reach into my carry-on bag to grab my headphones, I see the gummy bears. Since I am hungry and need something, I decide to open them up and just have a few to hold me over until we land. I wanted to save some for my son, so I had maybe 4 or 5. But I had 4 or 5 too many, because once the bears had a few minutes to adjust to their new home, they began to work. It started out with a little cramp, which is normal with gassing on a plane. You don't want to fart on a plane, so you hold it in. It is airplane etiquette. It would come and go over a few minutes, so I thought nothing of it. Then it got worse. The cramps intensified, the sweating started, and I began to notice the older ladies look over at me. About 30 minutes into eating those bears, I went from thinking, oh, these are just farts, I can hold on to them, to, oh dear God, not here. I have been a Christian my whole life, and this is a test. If there is a God, please help me leave this plane with my dignity intact. After waiting for the intense cramp wave to pass, I stood up and jumped over those two women. I couldn't wait for them to stand, so I stood up with my back facing to them and tried to shimmy past them. I think a toot came out because I heard one say, "Oh Lord, was that you?" After reaching the aisle, I waddled to the back of the plane where the least amount of risk would be. To my dismay, it was in use. That left one bathroom left in the front. I looked down the aisle and saw my Mount Everest. I had to somehow keep my wet cheeks tighter than Fort Knox whilst waddling forward, whilst praying no one got out of their seats. After 5 minutes of stop and go, I made it to the bathroom and was pulling down my pants as I entered into it. The door was still unlocked as the sweet release was underway. I thought I had died. I thought this was it. Even though I was on the throne confessing my sins, I thought my time was called. I lost count on how many knocks at the door there was, but I must have been in there for 45 minutes. But I made it. I washed my hands and threw water in my face to calm me down. Opening the door, I saw the faces look back at me. Apparently, the seal to the bathroom was not airtight, letting just the slightest airflow from the bathroom to the main cabin possible. These were daughters, mothers and children looking at me. I could feel their questions and comments. What have you done? We still have 2 hours left. Please divert this plane. As I began walking down, the man in the first row of first class grabbed my arm. He said, "Hey man, where's your seat?" Confused, I told him, and he said, "Go get your stuff and come back and sit here. You need this more than me." I was embarrassed and ashamed. I had a family at home waiting for me. I recommend these bears to anyone, but please eat them responsibly.
it's just the look that they all give you. It's just you fucking manky twat.
Yes, basically. And the thing is, you don't leave the smell behind, do you? When you walk out, it's like this cloud.
You can't
and it
open a
follows
window.
you. And it doesn't stay in the toilet, and then you can see everybody's nose twitch and go, "Oh,
So-
fucking hell, you skanky bastard!"
Quick, someone open a window.
Oh, we're in an aeroplane.
We're on a plane.